Hey guys, things are happening down at Chess Bootcamp HQ. I'm evolving this new evil repertoire, and I have to give full credit to Peter Morkos in the chat for giving me a far better name. I was thinking of Black Death for my repertoire as black, but because basically the idea is that we're going to emulate the Vienna, right? So if you are a Vienna Gambit player and you like these ideas and you like the idea of, I mean, there's some great things about, obviously, you've got your Vienna Gambit, right? Which is great. And then, let's say the knight retreats and you're going to try and you get this out to avoid that, and then they do something. And you're going to try and win this pawn back. You're going to try and castle this way. You're going to try and get your rook onto the open f-file. Because guess what? Freddy gone. Freddy no more. Freddy's out of the picture. Yeah? And so this idea of throwing Freddy up the board can lead to similar patterns. And chess is all about pattern recognition. Right? So my thinking is that if we can find different ways into similar territory, right? All involving, oh my god, they killed Freddy, or Freddy just launching himself at the enemy, then all's well. So what Peter said is you should name it after Freddy Krueger, because he's a mindless serial killer, and that's what Freddy is. Okay, so welcome to very early days, but I want to just give you guys a little run through the Freddy Krueger repertoire for white and for black. Okay, so this is like I say, very early on in the process, but I'm exploring different ways of basically getting f4 in when you're playing with white, or f5 in when you're playing with black. So come with me. Obviously, so we're going to start with the white pieces. So this is my Freddy white repertoire. It's available on Lichess. You can go and check it out. Okay, so the Black Death has now been renamed to Freddy Krueger Black. This is Freddy Krueger white. Okay, so obviously we're going to go Vienna, right? So forget the King's Gambit. I mean, you know, look, if you want to play King's Gambit, it's f4. Why not? Sod it, go for it. But I like this. I like this whole Vienna thing. I might go to the King's Gambit at some point in the future. Okay, now. So e5 is the most common response at this level from black, but we're going to go down the list. And basically, I want to come up with a response for every main response from your opponent that has at least 1% share of moves. All right, so that's one. The second most popular, obviously, is c5, the Sicilian. Okay, so for the Sicilian, I have been looking into the Smith-Morra Gambit. Right, but I actually think I'm going to go back to, rewind the clock a little bit and go back to the Grand Prix attack. Why? Well, because it's f4, yeah? Now you can also play, if you want to be a bit more daring, you can play an immediate f4, which doesn't score as well. That's 49% for black, whereas this is 45% for black, 50% for white. So it's a closed Sicilian first with knight to c3, and then you play f4, and happy days. And again, you can get your knight behind your pawn. Again, you can get your bishop out. It's got a variety of places. In fact, very often with the Grand Prix, you want to eliminate this bishop and try and swap it off for that knight if you can. Okay, so that's the Sicilian. We're going Grand Prix again, which makes me happy because I've got fairly good results with that in the past. What else? The French. Okay, now let's address the French. So, looking this up, option number 3 is an immediate f4, right? This is La Bourdonnais variation. The computer slightly favors black, but I know that as a former French player, I played the French for a year or two, I hated to see f4. Just didn't like to see f4. I did score relatively well against it, but I know I didn't like it terribly much. And it's kind of even down the board. There's nothing horrendous here, but that I think is something definitely worth looking into. And we're going to go for all the same kinds of patterns, right? So what else have we got? We've got the Scandi up next. Okay, so we've had King's Pawn, Sicilian, French, and now d5, the Scandinavian. Scandinavian's a bit of a funny one. So I'm suggesting that we capture, which is the best move from white, okay? And if you get like the main line here with queen out here, guess what? You can play an immediate f4, right? Now, the computer doesn't like it, slightly favors black. But again, on average, white is scoring 50% on Lee chess. And by the way, this is across the whole board, rapid and blitz, okay? That's what I've got it set to, that's what I'm using. So pretty much whatever black does now, white has a pretty good chance, okay? And the point is that most Scandinavian players are not going to be familiar with this move. Why? Because it's move popularity number like 8, okay? So they're just not going to see it very much. Not going to see it very much, and white scores 50% wins from this point. Okay, so that's that. If they don't capture with the queen, you get the Scandinavian modern. Then actually, I'm going to break with tradition here because f4 just isn't playable. Nobody plays it. It's stupid because you're just blundering a pawn and offering another one to the same knight. Yeah, it literally hasn't been played. So we can't do that. So what I'm suggesting here is this odd bishop b5 check idea. So if I go back, bishop b5 check here is the highest scoring, so it's best by test for white. And it hits 50%, and it's only the 5th most common move. So, I mean, I've played the Scandinavian modern for years, and I don't really know what to do against this one. So, 52% for white here. This is the best move from black to block with the bishop. Other moves are simply less good. And then you can just drop the bishop back. You might get this, get this check, and then you can launch Freddy. f3, kick the bishop away, bring the knight out, and this is very typical, and then the g-pawn gets involved in the fun, and this is 51% from white from this point. So, little bit of a break there, but unfortunately against the Scandinavian modern, there isn't really, Freddy's got off the mark, hasn't he, at the very least. Alright, next up, we have the Caro. The Caro Kana, okay? Now, I'm figuring that I will stick with my fantasy variation. It gets Freddy off the mark, it gets Freddy involved in the game. If they take, Freddy recaptures, and we've achieved our objective of opening up the F-file. Staff call, clean up on aisle 6, please. Clean up on aisle 6. Yeah? And there's a theme here. And it's a spooky theme. Because whatever happens in nearly all of these lines that I'm showing you, it's the same kind of thing. And it goes like this. Still gives me the creeps. Scared the absolute bejesus out of me, that film, when I was younger. Okay, so that is the Caro. Fantasy variation. I like this. From this point, white's doing 55% against 40%. It's not the most common response to the Caro-Kann, so you should have relative fun there. Next up, we have the Pitts defense, and straight f4. This is called the harmonist variation. I haven't looked into it. White scores 50 against 46% here. Looks like a whole heap of fun. So what's not to like? So lots of stuff to explore. Next up, we're off to Boringsville, Arizona, and we have the modern defense. All right, it's not that boring, but f4 here is 49 against 47. It's the 4th most common move, which they will see only 5% of the time. Obviously, they're expecting d4, which is played 55% of the time. We're going to surprise them. We're going to play f4. It doesn't even have a name. We might give it a name. But again, just the same kinds of old patterns over and over again. Now, the Alekhine defense. So, here's my suggestion, right? With the Alekhine defense, instead of pushing the pawn, which walks straight into what they want, right? I'm saying knight c3. Knight c3 is actually the 2nd most common. So pushing the pawn is 56%, knight c3 30%, okay? But if they now, for example, push e5, we're back to Vienna, and we know exactly what we're doing. We might play the Vienna Gambit, yeah? Now that's not the most common response. They're slightly more likely, about twice as likely, to play this. And to be honest, this is quite good for black. There's no two ways around it. There's no line here on the Lichess player's DB that actually gets equal results for white. Taking the pawn is one way. F4 is just terrible here. F3 is terrible as well. So, you know, I may need to keep looking there on that particular one. Again, but, you know, the Alekhine or the Alekhine is it's just a tough one. The people who do have the balls to play it tend to know it better than the majority of E4 players. That's just the problem, and it scores well at every level. I've looked into it before, and so on and so forth. So I think that's more or less it. We've got a couple of stragglers at the end, still clinging onto that 1%. Owen Defense, please, you know. So, I mean, that's kind of the opposite of the modern. They just want to fianchetto the bishop. And here, guess what? Just F4, right? F4, white scores 52% from here. It's most likely to go this way. You bring out your knight to defend the pawn, and still 52% for white, so that seems fine. And then the final one we want to look at is the Nimsovich defense with knight c6 and F4, right? Just bang it out. Just bang the bugger out. And this is 49 for white against 48 from this position. So there is lots to explore in the Freddy Krueger white repertoire. But now let us flick over and see what happens with the black repertoire. Now I've been over quite a lot of these lines a bit recently. So let's just see, I've updated it slightly. So obviously, most common start from white overall is E4. And as we've said, we're going E5. And from here, they have a few ideas. Now, we've looked at, let's just cover off knight, knight, and then we've got the Spanish, okay? And then we play this, which is the Schielmann defense, okay? That's a whole topic for itself, and black scores 50% against 44 from this point. You're more likely to see the Italian at the beginner and intermediate level, and again, we push F5. So it's 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. Black scores 49 against 47. This is the Rousseau Gambit, lots and lots of fun. Now, tricky one, the Scotch. Now, for the Scotch, we can play this. Now, this it has to be said, doesn't score that well. Okay, so this is 43 for black against 53 for white. But, you know, if you want to go full Freddy, it's playable. This is the point. And let's just also look at the most common line that you will get. So all the most played moves from this point, okay, we have takes, push, right? You're very familiar with this from the Vienna, okay? And the most common move here is knight e5. So the knight comes forward, you bring your knight out, and they play this. And look, now, from this point, black wins 48% against 47 for white. So it's not so cut and dried. I think there may be legs in this. So I was looking previously at the Steinitz with takes, and then throwing the queen out. But that's not Freddy style, okay? So if we want to play Freddy style, we're going to go for this and hopefully cling on. So that's basically what we do for this. If the knight comes out, we play out our knight, and we more or less know what we're doing against all the major moves. Now, what about the bishop's opening? The bishop's opening, guess what we have? And look, down the list, right? Down the list, we're looking for a 5. All the way down here, that's like number 10 or something, is also the highest scoring for black with 49%, and it's called the Calabrese Gambit, or the Calabrese Counter Gambit. So that is what we're going to be looking at with that, and I can't wait to get stuck into all these things, right? But at least the first few moves are going to be pretty Easy to remember most of the time because we just have to remember the rhyme. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And you see, with this one, they're just not going to be ready for this. Look, it's like 10th most popular thing, or 9th, right? F5. They're just not going to expect it at all, your normal Bishop's Opening crowd. Anything else that we'll get here? I mean, you might get the King's Gambit, so we need a whole line on that. I haven't really looked into that yet. But I have got a bit of a study on that, so we'll cross that one when we come to it. Now, so that's against e4, we play e5. There are some other openings that we must cover. Okay, so obviously d4. d4 is the second most popular opening, and guess what? We can play f5 straight away, and you're into Dutch land, right? We are into the Dutch territory, the Low Countries, and there's lots and lots of ways you can go from here. c4 is very common. We'll probably play knight f6, and it's 47-48, but the Dutch is known as an aggressive response to d4 and also to c4. If white plays 1 c4, d4 will very often follow, so you can go ahead and play f5 and go into Dutch lines. You've got lots of different ways you can do it. You can go classical, you can go Leningrad Dutch, you can go Stonewall Dutch. There's all kinds of options there. So that's how we handle d4. And if they go c4, then same thing. The Anglo-Dutch defense. I've played it a bunch of times. If you play the Dutch against d4, there's not so much to remember. Next up, this fellow is actually the next most popular. This is the Zuckertort Opening. And you can play f5 against it. Because look, where is it? f5. Down here, right? It's really unpopular. And it only scores 44 for black. But it's quite likely that you're going to find yourself transposing into something else that you know a bit better. The most common response here is d4. You can then bring your knight out, and it's 49-45 now in white's favour. So, you know, we're feeling kind of Dutch-like again. So we're getting into our familiar territory, and there's a lot to be said for that. Okay, after f3, we have this awkward e3, the Van Croix. Now, I've never really understood this opening because, you know, it's blocking in the dark squared bishop from the off. And we can just scroll down our list, and lo and behold, strike me down. And f5 is down there, down in position like 11, but it's scoring 51% for black, and it's doing very well. As far as I know, this doesn't really have a name. d4 is the most common, knight f6, and again, you know, we'll probably see something like this. c4 is played 13% of the time. Bishop d3 is played quite a lot. You can do this, you know. So it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. So that's the Van Croix. After Van Croix, we have just a few oddballs. The Hungarian, and guess what? There's a Hungarian Dutch, and we're 48-47. So there's nothing wrong with that. Now, f4, the bird opening, right? Now, is f5 even playable here? Not really. It's 52-43, right? And it's right down the list. So what I'm suggesting here is another break from there. f4, f5 just doesn't work, right? I'm suggesting the From's Gambit, where you give up these two pawns, get your bishop out, and black does pretty well here. This is 49-47 for black. You've got a slight lead in development, and most of your bird opening friends are not really going to know what to do. So e5, yeah, you know, it's the third most common response. Most people will play d5, trying to avoid trading off the center pawn. Right, is there anything else? Finally, at the bottom of the heap, oh, there's one more. The Nimzo Larsen attack, okay? And guess what we do? We can hit f5 there. This is the Dutch variation of the Nimsovich. So, or Nimsovich Larsen, and it's 49 for white, 46 for black, but we can play on. We can play on from here. And last but not least, or it probably is least, b4, the Polish And f5 is played against this with 49 to 46. That's probably fine. a5 is best by test for black with 50%. I'll take 46%. That seems fine for me. This is the Dutch defense against the Polish. There you go. So there's obviously a lot more in there. Now, let's just go back to... so that's all the different kind of move ones. And we've looked at if they bring their knight out, we bring our knight out, we go into those classical lines, all of which seem to have an f5 option. Now, there is another potential thing. We've looked at the bishop's opening, but what about the centre game? What about the centre game, guys? Now, this gets interesting as well, because f5 here is just awful. It scores 59 for white against 38, right? It's just terrible. We can't do it. However, what we can do is we can take once, and then if they go down the Danish Gambit, which is very, very likely, so from here, yeah, c3 here is played 46%, so nearly half the time they'll go for the Danish Gambit. And now we do actually have the option of f5. And is it even on this list? I can't even see it on there. But you can play f5 now. It doesn't score amazingly well, but so on average, so from here it's 54% for white, 43% for black. But let's look again at the most common line, right? So we have e takes f5 is common. We play knight f6. Okay, they take the pawn. Hang on. Yeah, and now instead of d5, which is the most common here, we have a couple of kind of sidelines, and bishop b4 check, and suddenly we're 50-50. Right? It's not hugely popular. This has been played 50 times, but it's 50-50. And we've got rid of Freddy, okay? And we're getting ready to castle. So we're in kind of familiar territory. And I'll tell you something else. Your Danish player isn't going to have a clue what to do from this point, right? But you might. So you could be far better prepared than your Danish opponent. So there we go. I think that's everything we've covered. One more major option that we found here is right after the knights come out, we've got the Ponziani, and we do have f5 here, the Ponziani counter gambit. Scores 52% for black against 44 for white. So all in all, boys and girls, I think that we found roughly about as many ways as is rationally possible to get Freddy involved in the game at the earliest possible opportunity. 1-2, Freddy's coming for you. Ben Feingold will turn in his grave, but I don't care, because I think this looks like a lot of fun. So I'm going to be creating lead chess studies for all of these lines, I think, over time. I'm going to be practicing it for a while, so I'm going to spend some time in the gym. I'm going to spend some time in Blitz, trying to get some ideas, get familiar with all of this. But like I said near the start, it's all about pattern recognition. And if you get used to not having an f-pawn, if you get used to ideas like this, 55% for black here. If they take, you push and annoy this knight, right? If this queen comes out here, you can play queen e7 very often. Yeah? So that's an idea. So queen e7 is the most common move here, and it scores 54% for white from there. Also knight f6 is absolutely fine. There's no rush. No rush to do anything. Yeah? So all good fun. So join me on this journey into the horror of the Freddy Krueger repertoire. I'm pretty excited about all of this. I hope you are too. So there you go. Just a quick update for everyone out there. Thanks for watching. See you later.